And I blew the smoke out and I went, wow, that's good. Can we get some more? It was crack. A week later, I was on the streets prostituting because I was addicted. And that started me on a journey through hell and back. My name is Joel Filmore. Hear my story. Growing up as a child of mixed parentage was interesting. My mother's white and my father's black. And I was born in 1970, and if you know anything about our history, 1970 was not a time for interracial relationships. Unfortunately, my mother had a very difficult life, and she made really bad decisions, and one of those decisions ended up getting her killed when I was 3 years old. And so at the age of 3, we went to live with my mom's side of the family in Michigan, and the abuse that I experienced in my aunt's home, it started with, physical abuse, and, I would be forced to stand in the corner from the time I got up till the time I went to bed as a 4, 5, 6-year-old child. We would be driving around in our family vehicle, and they would say things to me like, Joel, there's a nigger, or Joel, there's a Mexican, hide or they'll steal you. So I grew up terrified of people of color. Like, I was terrified of people who looked like me, and then they would try to compensate by saying, oh, but you're half white, so that's not you. But it was, because every day you're calling me a nigger. And these are the people who are conversely saying they love me because they're my family. So there's these weird mixed messages going on. Subsequently, that's also where the sexual abuse happened. I remember the first time engaging in sex play, and I was probably 4 or 5 years old, and I remember being underneath my bed with my female cousin, and we were both playing show me yours, show me mine. But this is behavior that we were taught by our older cousins and whatnot. And sex play was normal. It was what I knew growing up, and I didn't know that it was wrong, but I knew enough not to get caught doing it. By the time I was 7, 8 years old, I was seeking sex with adults on my own. Nobody needed to approach me. I was looking for it myself. And it's interesting, the reason a lot of kids never report sexual abuse isn't necessarily because they're afraid. In my case, I didn't report it because when I was being abused, it was the only time I was being treated kindly. So why would I tell that? Why would I report that to anybody? It was the only time I felt like I mattered, which subsequently led me down a very dark path as I got older. When I was 17 years old, I finally had enough, and I left home. And I moved out on my own, not successfully. I was couch surfing with family and friends and drinking and doing drugs a lot. Dropped out of high school. So I moved in with my brother and his wife in Grand Rapids, Michigan, and within a very short period of time, I started hearing this word, the word gay, in gay community, and gay people, and gay bars. And the interesting thing is, up to that point, I didn't even know that there were gay people. I just knew that I had an attraction to boys, but I didn't know that there was a term, because I grew up in a very small town in Michigan in the 70s, 80s. We didn't really talk about that stuff. It wasn't appropriate. My family on my father's side didn't know I was gay. Because I never said it. I wasn't out to them. And I had decided at that time that being gay was the reason my life was a mess. And so that was the first time that I consciously remembered actively trying to live a life that was based in heterosexuality. And so I started dating a girl in college, and I thought, well, I'll date her for a couple weeks, and then after a couple weeks I'll break up with her, and I'll tell my dad that she broke up with me. That way I can give myself some space. And I ended up liking her. And I was like, holy cow, maybe I'm not all the way gay. And we moved in together, and right before we were supposed to get married, my brother called me, and he said, did you tell her that you'd been with guys? And I said, well, no, why would I do that? I'm with her. I know how to be faithful. I know how to be monogamous. And he said, well, Joe, I can't be in your wedding if you don't tell her because she doesn't know who she's marrying, and it's not fair. And I agreed with him. And I broke down crying, and I hung up the phone, and she said, well, what's wrong? And I told her, and she said, I'll be right back. And we were staying at her parents' house in the basement. And she went upstairs and talked to her mom and came downstairs and says, Mama says you have to go. Now, mind you, this is my fiance, the woman I've been with for a year, and we were getting married in 2 months. So now I'm in a car with a garbage bag full of all my stuff going back to my dad's house. And about a week or so later, my dad says to me, "What are you going to do about the baby?" And I said, "What are you talking about? What baby?" He's like, "Well, she's pregnant." I'm like, "What?" He's like, "Yeah, she called and said she's pregnant." I'm like, "Why would she call and tell you she's pregnant, but she didn't tell me?" So then I started trying to get back together with her, and I'm calling, not because I want to be with her, but because I want to be in my child's life. And I was trying to at least develop a healthy relationship with her. And we were doing a lot of back and forth for about a week or so, and then she called me crying, and I said, "What's wrong?" And she's like, "I lost the baby. I had a miscarriage." And it was due to all the stress of everything that was going on. And I just snapped, and I had a break from reality. And that night, I left my dad's house with $1.50 in my pocket. I got on the bus and I went to the north side of Chicago, and I never went home. Ever. And I ran into a friend of mine who was a drag queen, and I told her about my child, and she's like, "Oh, honey, whatever you need, you can stay with me until you figure out what you want to do." I remember that day I stopped living as Joel, and I started living as a woman full time. And I started taking hormones and to transition to a woman. And we used to go out every single night, like go to the club, we would drink, and we were doing cocaine and all kinds of other drugs. And we were in the bar one evening, and this guy was staring at me, and he was really attractive. So I'm looking at him, he's got 3 girls, and these are biological females that he's with. And I looked at my friend, and I said, "Look at this guy, he keeps staring at me, he's cute." And she's like, "Oh, girl, don't mess with him, he's a pimp." And I remember saying, "Girl, it's 1991, there ain't no such thing as pimps." And sure enough, he was a pimp. So I'm hanging out with him, and I'm partying every day, all day, every day with him. I'm basically with him 24 hours a day. And we're doing drugs, and we're getting, drinking. And one day, about a week after I met them, we're in a hotel partying, and he pulled out a rock, and he says, "Do you ever try this?" And I said, "No, what is it?" He says, "Let me show you how to do it." And he put it on a pipe, and he smoked it, and he passed the pipe to me, and I hit it, and I blew the smoke out, and I went, "Wow, that's good. Can we get some more?" It was crack. A week later, I was on the streets prostituting because I was addicted. And that started me on a journey through hell and back. Fast forward, it's now December of 2002, and I'm exhausted from my life. And I'm sick of being touched by strangers. And I decided I wasn't going to turn tricks anymore. I was going to start stealing to support my habit. And my first time out, I stole a lady's purse, and I got caught 3 blocks later. And I went to court and went in front of the judge, and I said, "Yeah, I stole the purse," thinking I was going to get time served or something like that. And he said, "Okay, 3 years in prison." So now, here I am, locked up in prison, 3-year sentence, of which I have to serve 18 months. And eventually I got put in solitary confinement for my own safety. And all I had to do was read the Bible. That's all I had to do in solitary, so I just read it over and over and over again. And by the time I left prison, I had read the Bible 5 times cover to cover. And through that journey, that's when I started having conversations with God, because you can't read a book like the Bible and it not impact you. You just can't. And I remember having a conversation with God and saying, "If you love me and I'm this piece of shit that I am, why don't I love me?" And that's when I started rethinking, and I realized, wow, I'm 34 years old at the time, and I've been making decisions my entire life based on something that happened to me when I was 3 and 4 and 5 and 6. So basically, I was letting a little boy run my life. And so about 6 months before I got released from prison, I met with a prison counselor, and I applied to college, the University of Illinois at Chicago. And in June of 2004, I was released from prison. I started college in August of 2004. And because I was so afraid of relapsing on drugs, I just never stopped going. I went year-round, and I never stopped. And 10 years later, they called me Dr. Filmore. If you're like me, and you've experienced pain and trauma, if you find yourself closed off from others, the best advice I can give you is this: you will be hurt. Pain is a part of life. People don't grow when things are good. We only grow in the cauldron when things are difficult. The promise of love, of life, is real. And at the end of the day, our true calling is to fight fear at every step. When you find yourself afraid of something, that is the thing you have to move towards. Because therein lies salvation.